My friends, the Battle of Vovchansk on the Kharkiv front has turned into a mini Stalingrad. The battle is difficult, casualties are reportedly heavy. Both sides are pouring in their troops into the urban area. Every building, every floor becomes its own battlefield. To halt Russian assault detachments, Ukrainians are mustering some of their most elite units to reinforce the city's defenders. In response, Russian howitzers and TOS flamethrowers are breaking one Ukrainian counterattack after another. And then it's Ukrainian aviation that is dropping the biggest of loads on their opponents. Fighting around the factory district turned truly chaotic, and it seemed for a moment that Russian troops got encircled. The narrative is that against the odds, Ukraine managed to score a major victory. Here, according to Forbes, trying and failing to cross a river in Vovchansk, 400 Russian troops got cut off. Now they're surrendering.
We are winning!
Look, I don't want to be the one bursting the bubble, but none of this ever happened. They talk of a massive Russian surrender. Want to see what it looks like? Here you can see all 400 Russian soldiers that were captured by the Ukrainians in Vovchansk. Wow, super impressive. My friends, the cope is real. In turn, Bloomberg summarized the situation as Ukraine halts Russian attack. Putin is running out of time to achieve breakthrough in Ukraine. Out of time compared to what? It doesn't even make sense. Reality is Ukraine essentially transferred some of its most elite units to plug the gaps and stop a secondary Russian axis of attack. Meanwhile, the positions in Ocheretine continue to fall apart. Russian forces keep making territorial gains, and they are only 7 kilometers from the strategic crossroad linking Pokrovsk to Konstantinivka. What a disaster. Now, to turn the tide, Ukraine is pulling an ace out of its sleeves. The Ukrainian command is gathering battalions from various units to form some sort of armored task force that I will nickname Kampfgruppe Wolfstadt. For now, the bulk of these units are camouflaged somewhere in Kharkiv, but the first local counterattacks have already started. The objective of this counteroffensive is to push the Russians back to the border. More on that later. This video is sponsored by Delete Me. Are you tired of getting random scam calls every day? Because I am. Whenever you browse the web, websites can store your personal information and resell it to what is called data brokers. That's how your email ends up in countless mailing lists. This can also happen when you purchase items online with your credit card, where your personal information is being tracked and sold. And it can also happen with your phone number. That's why I recommend Delete Me. I'm very excited to share the results of my May 2024 report. I see how they analyzed 370 listings in April and another 354 in May. Of course, you can request each data broker to delete your data, but this process is long, tedious, and with no guarantee of success. Here in the report, I learned that I saved a total of 4 hours. And surprise, surprise, Delete Me removed me from the 2 data brokers you can see on screen, which had access to my name and phone number. That explains why I don't get nearly as many scam calls as before. It feels good to simply sit back and let Delete Me remove your private data from hundreds of data broker websites. To help you, Delete Me offers you 20% off when you go to joindeleteme.com/historylegends and use promo code HistoryLegends at checkout. For a few weeks now, all eyes are on Vovchansk. As always, the problem for Ukraine is Russian aviation and the enemy's howitzers. Ukrainian artillerymen from the 57th Mechanized Brigade positioned on this sector said that the Russians have a 5-to-1 advantage in firepower. Meanwhile, the brigade's deputy commander said the Russians turned Vovchansk into Bakhmut in 5 days. It seems Ukraine really needs the heavy howitzers of Josephine Jackson to turn things around. And according to this Ukrainian soldier on Twitter, on the 17th of June alone between 9 and 11 p.m., Russian aviation dropped 19 FAB bombs on Vovchansk. In my last video, we spoke about how most of the bridges across the Vovcha River had been destroyed, and we saw how it became difficult for Ukraine to send reinforcements and to resupply the troops positioned on the northern side of Vovchansk. The only way across was for small squads to advance by foot on their own. In response, the Ukrainians urgently set up a number of pontoon bridges across the river, like this German Biba bridge laying equipment. This pontoon bridge was geolocated right here, 2.5 kilometers east of the city center of Vovchansk. As you can see, it allows Ukraine to transfer reinforcements aboard vehicles, which is much faster and safer, all the while being able to rotate worn-out units. For example, this Canadian-made Russian Senator APC seen disembarking 7 soldiers inside this multi-level building. We can also see how multiple back and forth trips were carried under enemy fire. But that's the problem of fighting across a river. Your entire logistics and communication lines depend on a couple bottlenecks. This means this sector is the new center of gravity of the Ukrainian defense of Vovchansk. And this is also what allowed the Ukrainian bridgehead to hold. This pontoon crossing is so important that on June 20th, Ukrainian assault detachments from the 36th Marine Brigade stormed the Russian positions in this sector. We have a Ukrainian drone overlooking Russian trenches and another one ready to drop grenades. If we zoom in, we have multiple groups of 3 to 4 stormtroopers creeping their way forward inside the trenches, clearing one position after another. Meanwhile, another unit runs above the trenches to flank the Russian defenders. Logically, for the Russians, their job is to search and destroy these very precious engineering equipment. In this one, you can see the Biba pontoon I showed you earlier being hit. And here from the 2nd of June, a Striker APC was destroyed on some pontoon bridge near Vovchansk. In the end, despite the initial surprise, Ukrainian forces fought extremely well. The front line in the city center barely changed over the first 2 weeks of the month of June. This urban fighting also turns into a sniper's heaven.
Давай, парни, поработаем чуть-чуть.
Meanwhile, on the western part of the Kharkiv front, Ukraine deployed units of the elite 5th Assault Brigade. In turn, Russian infantry units could not push further and fought to a standstill 3 kilometers north of Liptsy. On the 7th of June, the Ukrainians even managed to launch a counterattack on Hl. In this video, you can see a Ukrainian armored vehicle firing one round after another, spraying traces all across the settlement. And from this angle, the situation is a bit more clear. It's one vehicle literally firing at one building after another. However, no Ukrainian infantry seems to have been disembarked. It seems this armored raid was simply a hit-and-run attack to pin down enemy forces, because they're doing the same exact thing using continuous drone strikes on that same settlement. 10 days later, Ukraine launched another attack on Hl, which involved units of the 13th Kharkiv Brigade of the National Guard. In this video, you can see Ukrainian M113 APCs pass by a friendly trench bastion. 600 meters later, they hammer a Russian outpost at point blank. On the map, the friendly trenches were geolocated here, and the Ukrainian armored vehicles pushed 600 meters in this direction, where they engaged enemy forces. This allowed other APCs upgraded with cages to pass through and disembark infantrymen right next to the village. The Ukrainian troops landed somewhere in this tree line before making their way into the settlement by foot. In this footage, Russian riflemen tried to dislodge some of these Ukrainian soldiers from one of the houses in Hl. Then, on the 10th of June, there's this video of a Ukrainian vehicle driving away from the front, maybe after a rotation, until it was targeted by artillery and double-tapped by FPV drones. Tragic story. Now, take a look at that. What is this? Is this a joke? Wow, beautiful fortifications.
Emotional damage!
That's when Ukrainian journalist Butusov went to the front in that sector to check out a position from where the Russians had been knocked out of. On Telegram, he said he saw dozens of Russian KIAs. Did he really though? Well, I watched the entire video, and over the course of hundreds of meters of progression, I counted 13 bodies. You see how casualty reports can get inflated. One guy says 12, then next thing you know it's about dozens, and then it becomes 30, 50, 100 enemy losses. With that being said, allegedly a Russian soldier from the 5th Company, 1009th Regiment, claimed his unit had been decimated by Ukrainian forces in Vovchansk. Only 12 out of 100 soldiers were still alive. Meanwhile, these Russian soldiers from the same regiment claimed it's all fake. That video of the Russian soldier does seem a bit off. He doesn't wear any helmet. He doesn't seem to be in any trench. I don't even see any military equipment or rifle on him. We don't even know where he is. So it definitely could be fake. Maybe the video is true, but the information is fake. At the same time, since this Russian offensive in Kharkiv mostly consisted of infantry units with no armored support, high casualties are plausible. I don't know, what do you think? In this battle of attrition, both sides are attempting to disrupt the arrival of enemy reinforcements. Here you have a Russian recon drone that guided multiple FPV drone strikes on this Ukrainian tank. This drone attack was geolocated right here on the map against the Ukrainian tank that was driving in this direction, away from the battlefield. Potentially, this could mean Ukrainian tanks are hidden somewhere at the rear, such as in this forest. From there, they can advance 4 kilometers at full speed, fire a couple rounds on enemy positions, before falling back and returning to safety. By the 15th of June, no territorial changes in Vovchansk. Good thing I don't do daily updates, it would have been extremely boring. However, this is when this video was released of multiple glide bombs dropped by Ukrainian aviation on the aggregate factory. More specifically, GBU-39B guided bombs launched from upgraded Sukhoi 27s. Take that, orcs! I bet for the Ukrainian troops on the ground it felt good to finally see friendly pilots back in the air. Hold on a second. Wasn't this factory Ukraine's stronghold in Vovchansk? That's right. Some Russian troops got hold of the aggregate factory. Now, as you can see on this map, it seems as if the Russians here are encircled, and this led to a lot of speculation in mainstream media. Forbes, over the weekend, the equivalent of several Russian battalions captured the Vovchansky plant in central Vovchansk. Or from Newsweek, Russian troops surrendering after getting trapped in Vovchansk complex. So much cope. It's literally the cope festival. Here's what really happened according to pro-Ukrainian deep state UA. As early as May 20th, Russian reconnaissance groups made their way inside the factory. It's only on June 1st that Ukrainian forces noticed them and managed to cut them off. From that moment on, these Russian soldiers were delivered water, food, and ammunition via drones. I find this pretty fascinating how this has now become the norm of warfare. On the 6th of June, a fire team of 5 Russian soldiers advanced towards the factory, but reportedly only one made it. 2 days later, another attempt. This time a squad of 15 Russian soldiers reached the factory. And on the 13th of June, Deep State UA reported that an MTLB armored fighting vehicle, filled to the brink with reinforcements and ammunition, also reached the aggregate factory. That would mean an extra 11 Russian soldiers. Theoretically, a total of 32 Russian soldiers reinforced the original unit. Where did it say that 500 Russian soldiers had been surrounded and that they were all surrendering? This gives me massive Severodonetsk vibes. Can we even talk about an encirclement when Russian lines are only 200 meters away from the factory? We can safely assume that the Russians actually segmented the Ukrainian breachhead in two. It's a dangerous situation for the armed forces of Ukraine. The units here could be completely isolated, and it's only a matter of time before they pull back. And these ones survive only through pontoon bridges installed in this sector. According to the latest news, both sides are fighting tooth and nail over these high-rise buildings. On the 17th of June, forward elements of the Russian army were targeted right here, 800 meters north of Tighe. We can already witness Russian attempts to outflank Ukrainian positions and their entire supply lines. Of course, how is the Russian army achieving all this? Putin has 500,000 soldiers in Ukraine and is launching human wave attacks. Can you show us a single video of these human wave attacks? That's what I thought. And apparently to help this Russian move, the 22nd Regiment of the 72nd Division is going to be equipped with roughly 60 armored vehicles. If properly brought to the front and camouflaged, This armored force could very well overrun Ukrainian positions along the Vovcha River. Now check out this picture, we'll see if you have a good eye. Those 3 vehicles were destroyed between June 9th and the 14th. Can you guess what model of tanks those are? Let's use the following FPV drone footage to get a closer look. Surprise, surprise, the drones targeted the Russian engineering equipment. That's right, the Russian 72nd Division built a series of fieldworks and trench lines just 2 kilometers north of Vovchansk. And those are only the ones that are visible using satellite imagery. It doesn't take into account those that were hidden in the tree lines. This means in the larger scope of the operation, the Russian army is fully invested in the Battle of Vovchansk. This means they have already prepared fallback positions in case shit hits the fan in Vovchansk, but these trenches could also house numerous battalions that could come as reinforcements in the coming weeks and months. Russia is preparing all this because Ukrainian General Syrskyi is gathering an elite strike force to counterattack the Russians in Kharkiv Oblast. We're talking about some of Ukraine's most capable units like the 5th Assault Brigade, the 13th Khartia Brigade, and the 71st Yega. The main blow will most likely be delivered in the Lipsy sector due to its proximity to Kharkiv. As for the course of action, phase 1 would be to reconquer Hliboke. The Ukrainians could push using the main road, but they could also transfer some of their infantry units across this residential sector and flank the settlement from the west. From there, phase 2, they could push towards Morochovets and lastly, Pilna. Now the question is, can Ukraine achieve similar results in Vovchansk? In the meantime, Ukrainian engineers restored the crossing point over the Seversky Donets River near Stary Saltiv. However, on the 13th of June, Russian aviation fired a high-precision Kh-38ML missile on a convoy trying to cross the river. Although this information looks spectacular, the crossing point seems to be okay, and more supply trucks will be able to reach the front line. From a logistics perspective, this shortens communication lines to 60 kilometers between Kharkiv and Vovchansk, instead of 110 kilometers if they had to pass through Chuhuiv. As of now, the Ukrainian order of battle around Vovchansk is the following. There is the 36th Marine Brigade, that's a capable, solid, well-trained unit. The Elite Assault Brigade of the police, it's a unit with high cohesion and that fought very well south of Bakhmut. And both of these units hold significant offensive capabilities. We have a battalion of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, which most likely provides the bulk of the armored vehicles. It's also one of Ukraine's S-tier formations. Most of the Ukrainian drone strikes in Vovchansk were marked as belonging to the 57th Brigade. And I also think most of the Ukrainian artillery units deployed in the sector of Vovchansk are attached to the 57th Brigade. Same thing in this article by CNN, with this howitzer marked as belonging to the 57th Brigade. According to some rumors, the infantry component of the 57th Motorized Brigade has been severely treated in the battle for Vovchansk, and that's why the 36th Marine Brigade was sent to replace them. Lastly, the 153rd Infantry Brigade. Yeah, I know, the infamous brigade that used to be mechanized. This is a newly created unit made of conscripts, and you can imagine their morale is pretty low due to poor training and literally having not enough armored vehicles for being called in mechanized formation. Oh yeah, and I forgot the 125th Territorial Defense Brigade. You can't forget any offensive operations with them. But the problem is, even if they remain on the defensive, you can't really have high expectations. The reason why I'm telling you all this is that all these elite units of the Ukrainian armed forces could have been very useful to stop the Russians in Ocheretine. So yeah, by every metric, the Russian recon force in Kharkiv was a trap, as it pinned down some of the only Ukrainian formations that are capable of counterattacking and ongoing on offensive operations. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The link is in the description below.